Blizzard is letting us see under the hood with some of the data from the Overwatch 2 beta, and it's pretty darn interesting. So they obviously recognize that there is the need to look at stuff both from a, hey, let's bundle everything together data standpoint in terms of all skill ratings, as well as a, hey, let's split out the skill ratings. They point out that when they split out skill ratings, they find that players at the top tend to break the metas a little bit, find the broken stuff faster, develop new stuff, find unintended interactions, whereas the lower MMR people, they can look at and go, okay, this looks like it's more unfun to play against. That's a bigger issue. We need to smooth this out for the sake of the entirety of the ladder. Makes sense. But for this data analysis, they mostly looked at combined stuff. Given that quick play has a wider MMR range, that probably makes a lot of sense. So what did they find, or what do they want to tell us? So first they're going to tell us hero usage rate. Okay, hero usage rate, cool. We see Sojourn was played a ton to start, surprising no one. She fell off over time. She did get some buffs, which account for some of these spikes that she got, but she mostly did fall off over time. Anna, on the other hand, had a wildly high pick. It's not actually that wildly high, they tell us, because yes, it is high, higher than normal, but people like Anna, people always have liked Anna. I can attest to that with some of the views on my mini guides, how Anna gets more than certainly Wrecking Ball, for example. Anna's a popular hero. A lot of people like to play her across the ladder. Fine. But this isn't really good enough. They want to give us a better number than this. So they go, let's do some weighted usage. Let's go ahead and factor the number of other heroes you could pick in each role. So for Anna, she's not fighting against nearly as many supports for time as Sojourn is fighting against other DPS. Fine, so this is a slightly better metric to look at. Probably needs to factor tanks and the fact that there can only be one of them in there. A little bit more than it does, but I'm not too worried about it. And then they get into something that's perhaps a little bit more interesting. So let's look at how data and feedback drive changes. Our team has a focused goal for the PvP beta. We wanted all of our heroes to be fun to play without being unfair to play against. That's a little tough to do. Like, you do want your heroes to feel fun, feel like you're really accomplishing a lot, but it is a competitive game, not a PvE game. So if you're going to feel powerful, that usually comes at the expense of someone else being defeated. And in a competitive game where a decent proportion of your players playing are interested in winning is their fun. That's not everyone's fun, but that's a lot of people's fun. Well, if someone wins, someone has to lose, sort of thing. Again, that's competitive PvP for you. Our usage rate analysis suggests that we were on track with the former, and thus our focus turned to game balance. Tell me about game balance. Deciding how to balance a hero is a purposeful decision that is made with input from many sources, data-driven or otherwise. For example, consistent feedback from support players regarding the survivability of the role in the beta directly informed many of the support changes in the May 5th balance update. This concerns me. Because we saw what happened in the Overwatch 2 beta, and early on there was a take from people like ML7 that, hey, supports don't feel fun, supports are just getting farmed, they don't have a good time. We know some of this is because there's not a second tank there, some of this is the DPS speed movement buff, but pretty quickly that turned around. Within really just a couple days, people realized, wait, the 15 health per second after only 1 second is actually really powerful. Supports not having to nade themselves, not, Brig being able to get her health back without her other support paying attention to her. Some of this stuff is really powerful. It lets them increase their uptime without spending their self-healing abilities quite a bit. So that's actually pretty powerful, and that narrative turned, at least in the people who originally started to spread it. But it didn't turn with the whole community. It didn't necessarily turn on the Blizzard forums. So that's a little bit of a thing. In fact, in OWL, there's a lot of question over, hey, are Annas the most influential players in Overwatch League in Stage 1 here? So supports are pretty darn powerful. But because the narrative was set, the feedback was, hey, the survivability is a problem. Hey, we need to do this, all sorts of things. And if they did it based on the feedback, that concerns me a little bit because that was a narrative thing. That wasn't necessarily reality. Now, if they instead want to revert back to, hey, no, we did look at the data and actually survivability was just fine at lower levels, but at higher levels where that DPS speed increase was worth more and that health per second was worth less, supports were actually struggling, like 15% more deaths in GM compared to life, that's okay with me, if that's fine. If the narrative caused them to go pull their attention over to the data, that makes sense. But I get a little bit worried about, hey, we listened to people saying they're not having fun when people are very, hey, we'll go with the flow, we'll go with the crowd on some things. And a lot of this was also, they just didn't have new fun stuff to do, not a power plays. And they did get some pretty meaningful buffs. They got, again, in that last patch that they're talking about, they got that, oh, hey, let's have super easy mercy super jump that can be used whenever in the middle, infinite flight. They got BAP given a second regenerative burst, basically turned into a second anti-burst cooldown that's quite powerful. So I'm worried a little bit about this here. Not because supports are, oh my goodness, about to take over the game, but I just worry a little bit about, okay, well, if you guys are advertising that you're that swayed by public opinion, that you're that swayed by, oh, hey, we want to go petition this, you're gonna get petitioned a lot. So I'm concerned, but that's okay. Let's move on. That's just, my little rant aside. Player feedback is one of the signals that change is needed. Data can help inform these decisions as well. I hope data is informing them. Data is not perfect by itself. It does need to be reasonably analyzed. It does need to be tempered with reality, with people who actually understand the game. We'll see if those are at Blizzard, but hey. Okay, but then they're going to talk about this, which is important. So the problem is the more a hero is played, even if its win rate goes up, the more a hero is played, based on its pick rate going up, and usually if its win rate goes up, its pick rate will go up, that'll drive its win rate back down to 50%. So a hero might look just fine because it has a 50% win rate, but if that's because it's being played on both sides of every match, well, then it has to have a 50% win rate. Because you have to mirror it, because it's too powerful, it has too much influence, but your data isn't showing that it's too powerful. So how do they account for this? Well, they account for this with unmirrored win rate timeline. Unmirrored win rate. Cool. They can see when the hero isn't playing against itself. That makes a lot of sense. That's great. Has some issues with heroes like Symmetra, who generally get played in situations where she's strong and then get swapped off of when we're looking at situations where she's not strong. So she might get played on King of the Hill, for example, and she might get played on something like Night Market, where she's really strong, and then not played on something like Garden, where she's weaker. And that means that, hey, it increases her win rate, she helps, she does a lot there, it's a really good place for her, but then if she does lose the map, she was only played for a third of the time, so she gets a 0.3 loss instead of 1 loss there, because they are able, of course, to factor in playtime, and if you're played for half the time and then you get a loss, you only get half a loss, that sort of thing. Okay, that makes some degree of sense. So there's some issues with it, but this sort of is what people would like access to. Unmirrored win rate. It also might have some issues with some of the rock, paper, scissors, counter-picking stuff, especially in the tank world now, where there might be some things where, hey, maybe you're looking at things where Winston is really good. In fact, if we start breaking these out by roles, we can actually see Winston in the tank role is quite good, has a very high hero unmirrored win rate over the life of the beta, but if people started playing more Roadhog when they saw Winston's, maybe that would drive down Winston's unmirrored win rate. In fact, maybe it would go negative, below the 50% line there, but would he still be the best tank? Because if you have to play Hog, that's a terrible experience. Maybe. Anyway, there's some problems with it, but this is interesting to see. If we scroll back up and take a look at supports, we can see that when they applied the Zen buff, that was a huge jump. Got a 5% jump in win rate off of that extra 25 HP they got. Yes, also got the super kick and knockback on it, extra damage, all that, but they're aware that historically health has been a big swing to win rate there. So not too surprising. We did see it was a big jump there. Soldier, on the other hand, if we move over to DPS, had a hard fall, 6% win rate loss from the nerfs that he got. So that tack visor change clearly wasn't a net buff overall. I mean, maybe it was for tack visor. You can make up your mind on that. But overall, Soldier had a significant nerf. 5% win rate up, 6% win rate down. Those are significant changes that we're looking at. So this is interesting. They're not really going to conclude it with any big, oh, this is, huge thing, other than saying, okay, he did get hit maybe a little too hard with the nerf bat. But we look at this and say, hey, it's pretty cool to see this never-ending cycle balance here. I would say what this tells us is we want the hero unmirrored win rate timeline. Like, this is what we as players would love to have almost constant access to. I don't know that we're going to get it, but this would be the place that the best data-driven arguments would come from, or at least the ones that the devs would be most likely to listen to. So that was interesting. Let me know what you think. Were you happy with the balance changes we saw over the course of the beta? Unhappy? Would you like to see, hey, more focus on splitting up the SRs so that they can look more at the high end, more at the low end? Let me know all that stuff in the comments down below. If you're enjoying the content, drop a like, consider subscribing for more Overwatch and Overwatch 2 analysis, review, thought-provoking content, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Temporal out.